adjectives to describe a beast of a storm, because that's what it is. 145-mile-per-hour
Yeah,
sustained winds. So this information as of that 2 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, and we're just about 30 minutes or so away from their next advisory. That's going to come at approximately 5 p.m. Eastern time, and we will be bringing you the very latest information from that advisory right here on Fox Weather. But kind of the overall consensus right now, that track, is that there is a potential that we could see a landfall of Hilary getting closer to kind of the Baja of Tortuga. So this is on the Baja of the Peninsula. But what also is going to occur at that point is that it will be moving into a less favorable environment, meaning that we'll start to see that kind of rapid decay of Hilary moving into colder sea surface temperatures, as well as kind of more hostile upper level winds. Now, with that being said, though, there's still the potential that we could be dealing with a tropical storm in San Diego. So this is still the potential. As you can see, our kind of forecast models coming into general consensus right through San Diego, also portions of Los Angeles, on into kind of the Sierra Nevada mountains. That's where we could be dealing with very heavy torrential rain that is going to exacerbate flooding concerns, as well as strong gusty winds, tropical storm force winds, mudslides, debris flows, you name it. The threats are there. And so that's why we have, for the first time ever, a tropical storm watch that has been issued for portions of Southern California. Again, do not be surprised if we start to see even additional areas added to those watch areas. And you can see right along the Baja, we've got hurricane watches, as well as hurricane warnings already in effect. I do want to bring in now Fox Weather meteorologist Michael Estime, because, again, the fact of the matter is that this is a very unusual event, especially for the fact that it's August, after all.
Right.
It's unusual. It's not unprecedented. But a lot of these locations, we are going to be receiving close to our yearly average rainfall in just a few days.
You know, and here's what's even more wild. So we crunched the numbers on what our forecast is projecting versus what it looks like in terms of a yearly average. And you have got to see this. Kendall's exactly right. A lot of spots in the desert Southwest could pick up their yearly total of rainfall in this area. A couple of isolated spots. Look at Death Valley, California, known as the hottest place on Earth, right? They set record temperatures of like 134 degrees in years past, but they're expecting out of this system 275% above their yearly average. What does that mean to you in layman's terms? It means that they're basically going to be picking up 3 years worth of rain through the weekend and into early next week. That's a ton of rain. So the next big question is, well, how much rain are we talking? Let's focus in. Here's generally speaking where Death Valley is. That's upwards of 3 to 5 inches of rain. By the way, in Death Valley, for the month of August, they only typically pick up 1/100th of an inch of rain. So when we're talking about 3 to 5, perhaps even in some of the northern tier and on top of some of those mountains, just east of San Diego, as you know, that mountain range, it'll peak at around 6,500 feet. We could be talking about more than 5 to 8 inches of rain. That's a ton of rain. Here's what it looks like toward, again, the San Gabriel Mountains. Really, it's our mountaintops where we'll pick up the heaviest rain. All of that rain, though, funneling down the mountain toward Malibu. And unfortunately, creeks, rivers, and streams will become inundated, overwhelmed with water. We're expecting lots of flash flooding in this area, and especially just on the eastern edge of the mountain ranges. As Brian Norcross was saying before, the topography really has an important impact on all of this. But from Death Valley through Vegas, several inches, Kendall, of rain is possible. It's one of the reasons why Sunday we have an extreme risk for some pretty serious flooding moving forward. And it's not just on Sunday, but that threat will linger into Monday, too. So, again, I think rain is certainly going to be a huge issue out of this.
Right.
Sunday night, especially into early Monday.
Yeah, I mean, this is a level 4 out of 4 threat, especially on Sunday. And so we've got a lot at play here. And it's not just the heavy rain. rain. That we know. It's also the fact that Hilary is expected to bring some really strong winds to much of the southwest. And so, although they're not expected to be hurricane force, they're still going to be very, very dangerous. Now, notice what's going to be taking place. So, we still have Hilary working into a moderately conducive environment. But notice what's up ahead. So we've got some dry air, meaning that Hilary, as it runs into the dry air, as well as those cooler sea surface temperatures, that's when we will start to see Hilary essentially fall apart. But with that being said, we will still be talking about some pretty strong gusty winds. So I don't want you to let your guard down, but we aren't talking about a major hurricane impacting Southern California. Now, here, let's time this out. The winds, they are going to be arriving as early as about Sunday morning. So stopping this about 6 a.m. Notice San Diego, especially into southern Los Angeles, we could be talking about winds gusting about 30 to 40, even upwards of 40 to 50 miles per hour, and it gets stronger. Notice by Sunday night, we will be talking about winds, especially just off the coast, upwards of even 50 to 60 miles per hour as Hilary works its way inland, impacting locations in southern Nevada. So that's when we'll also be talking about some really strong wind gusts come Monday morning. So definitely not the best start to our work week, but also it's all across the region. So the desert Southwest and all the way kind of right along the I-5 corridor where we're going to be feeling those impacts. So unfortunately, folks need to kind of batten down those hatches right now.
Yeah, great call there, Kendall. Absolutely. Rain and wind will certainly be a huge issue moving forward. So friends and family, especially down towards San Diego, really need to make sure that they're staying weather ready and weather prepared. And as Hilary spins off the Mexican coastline toward California, strong winds will whip up the waves on the California coast. In fact, coastal regions from San Diego to Long Beach are gearing up for the potential impacts. Fox 5 San Diego forecaster Heather Lake joined Fox Weather earlier today to break down Southern California's preparations. Here's a clip of what Heather had to say.
Good afternoon to you guys there on the East Coast. You know, getting to experience hurricane-style winds on the West Coast, very unique for all of us here this morning. As you take a look out here, we're at Pacific Beach, and the conditions are not as impressive as I think one would imagine preparing for a tropical storm system moving our way. But right now we got 2 to 4 foot sets rolling in. We have some of the best surfers in the country that live here and are actually talking to me about looking forward to the kind of conditions that we could see depending on the path of Hilary. Obviously, you see people getting out in the surf and enjoying it, but could be very dangerous, not only for boaters, surfers alike, increased rip current risk. When we see the south swell, that's what a lot of our surfers are looking for, but we also see storm surge. So a lot of people getting those sandbags today. We have a lot of our county emergency centers getting the sandbags, people having to fill them up with sand and getting ready for those flood-prone areas in San Diego County. The biggest question on everyone's mind right now is, how do I prepare for a hurricane? This is very unique, a very unique situation for people on our coastline all the way to our San Diego County deserts. We don't normally get ready for something like this. I will say that we had a very intense rainy season for us, so a lot of people have experienced the rainy season much better and understand when we have a flood watch in effect what to do, which we have right now, Saturday all the way into Monday. So looking ahead and seeing what they need to do. But as far as having a go bag or having a plan in place for a hurricane, people in San Diego are not prepared. They don't know what to do. So that's what we're doing today, is just talking to folks, making sure that they know what to do to get ready.
And that was Fox 5 San Diego forecaster Heather Lake reporting. And right now, cities and towns along the West Coast are preparing for Hilary. So let's take a deeper dive into what you might need as the system turns closer to the U.S. mainland. Because it's really important that you are planning ahead of time. That window to prepare, it's quickly getting smaller and smaller. And so that's why you need to know your zone. You have to understand, especially if you kind of live in an evacuation zone. Right now, there's no evacuations up for locations in Southern California. But it is important, like Heather was mentioning, to build an emergency kit that can sustain you and your family about 3 to 5 days. So make sure you've got a lot of water in that kit, as well as non-perishable food items, some tools, so hammers, as well as even just anything else you might need, sanitation items. But I think what's most important is the important family documents. So think about your driver's license, as well as your social security card, your insurance, all of the important documentation that you are going to need in the event that, unfortunately, you might be kind of stranded for a while. So definitely start to prepare now because we are going to be feeling those impacts in Southern California as early as tomorrow. And it was a dangerous commute this morning in New England as severe storms rolled across Rhode Island and Massachusetts with several tornadoes reported. The details and video of the aftermath. And Fox Weather comes right back. We're back now on Fox Weather, and we want to bring you the latest information on Hurricane Hilary, which is still a major Category 4 storm with sustained winds of about 145 miles per hour. It's moving to the northwest at about 10 miles per hour, so a pretty good clip. Now, understand that this information is as of that 2 o'clock advisory Eastern time from the National Hurricane Center. And so we are awaiting that next advisory that is just about to come in from the National Hurricane Center. This will be their 5 o'clock advisory. So once we have that new information, we will be bringing it to you immediately right here on Fox Weather. So stay tuned in for the very latest. But notice what has happened since Wednesday. We were dealing with just an area of investigation on our hands, and then quickly it worked its way all the way to tropical storm strength, and then Category 1 to 2, now all the way up to Category 4 strength in just really 24 to 48 hours. And so notice what's still expected to happen throughout this evening, potentially a little bit more strengthening up to about 150 miles per hour sustained. So we could watch as additional strengthening could occur by tonight, but then that would be it. Game over at that point, because then what happens is Hilary will be working into colder sea surface temperatures. So those temperatures will be dropping from really kind of the 80s right about here down to the 70s and then into the 60s as we get closer to the U.S.-Mexico border. And so anticipate that rapid kind of decay of Hilary, but still until then, we know that the Baja, the peninsula itself, is going to be feeling those impacts, already feeling those impacts, some strong gusty winds, some heavy rain, and certainly heading into tomorrow as we start to see kind of that moisture arriving into locations like Southern California, as well as into the desert Southwest. And so the time to be ready, you need to be ready in San Diego by Sunday night at the very latest. I want you ideally to be prepared before then. So by Sunday morning, mid-morning, I want you to be prepared. Make sure that you've got all of your important documents, as well as kind of a hurricane preparedness kit, just in terms of having plenty of water for you and your family, as well as your pets, non-perishable food items, because the big concern is going to be for the strong gusty winds, potentially tropical storm force winds, as well as flooding. That is the big concern, as we could be dealing with catastrophic flooding impacting millions from Southern California all the way through the desert Southwest. things in the Gulf are heating up. So we're tracking 4 disturbances in the Atlantic. So 2023, it has been busy so far, to say the least. We've had 5 named storms so far, Michael, and unfortunately we know that we're getting closer and closer to the peak of our Atlantic hurricane season.
Yeah, we typically peak September the 10th to September the 11th. That's typically when we see the most number of storms, and that's when we see the most active part. But we have 4 already, and really we want to work basically from west to east, because this is really the storm that we're tracking that's closest to the United States, which could have some influences on our weather. But again, as you mentioned, there's a lot of moisture to play with. The open waters of the Atlantic, of course, as you know, earlier in the year and earlier this summer, a lot of it was subdued because of all of the dust from Africa. Well, as of this point, it looks like a lot of that dust is really beginning to kind of fizzle and fade, and it's really opening up that that channel for these tropical systems to really get going.
Exactly. So you mentioned, we've got that dry, dusty air still in place, especially a little further to kind of the east of the Lesser Antilles. But as it kind of is able to overcome all that dry, dusty air, that's when we could potentially be talking about some tropical development with some of these areas of disturbed weather. But it's a low-end chance, and also really not posing any threat to land. So that's what we like to see. However, there is a chance, especially with that system that's pretty close to southeastern Bahamas. That's a system that could be bringing some pretty significant rain to places in kind of the western and central Gulf of Mexico by next week.
Yeah, you think about the, island of Hispaniola, Haiti, the Dominican Republic. This is the area that we're watching. And as you just mentioned, it looks like that little general cluster of showers and thunderstorms, Kendall, is going to work between Cuba and then, say, Key West, Florida, through that channel into the open waters of the warm Gulf of Mexico.
Very warm.
Look at these water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. Literally upper 80s and, Kendall, low 90s toward Clearwater, just off of Tampa. And tropical systems, as you know, they thrive in that sort of environment when it's that warm.
Incredibly warm. And so that's why, especially for some of these areas, we have to watch kind of the beginning to the middle part of next week. A low-end chance of development, but still it's a chance nonetheless. And so we'll be watching it very carefully, but it could be bringing some beneficial impacts. And we just now have the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center, the newest information coming in, and so we still have Hurricane Hilary as a Category 4 hurricane. Now the changes we have watched as those sustained winds have now dropped from 145 miles per hour sustained down to just 130 miles per hour sustained, but still very powerful storm and moving to the northwest about 12 miles per hour. So we do want to bring in now Brian Norcross. And Brian, we were kind of waiting to see what it was going to happen. Also, that central pressure has changed just slightly, but this is still an incredibly powerful storm.
Yeah, what's happened is we finally have aircraft in there. So the wind estimates that we had before were based solely on looking at the satellite and estimating how fast are the winds blowing. We haven't had any direct measurements until just now. So the hurricane hunters were in there. I had said earlier, I did not see any reports of winds up in that 140, 145 mile per hour range. And I didn't see any pressures that were down in that 939 range, was what their estimate was just looking at the satellite. So here's the new advisory just in now from the Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time. Obviously, 130 mile an hour estimate with the winds right around the center there, moving to the northwest at about 12 miles per hour. And it's going to actually increase in speed as it moves to the north and northwest and then more northerly, because it's going to get caught in this river of air related to that super strong high pressure system causing the incredible heat in the central part of the country. And there you see the pressure actually measured by the hurricane hunters at 948 millibars. So now let's see if we look at the cone. It's going to look a little funny because it's brand new. We haven't had a chance to adjust it yet, but you see that the Hurricane Center keeps it about the same intensity. Now it's going to pretty soon move over. You see where the water temperatures change color here on our map. So the super warm water is down here in the red, and then it gets into the yellows, and then it gets into the greens and the dark greens up here. It's actually in the 60s up there off Southern California. So the 130, 120. So still same kind of thinking as in the northern part of Mexico. at northern part of Baja. It's a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane, tropical storm over Southern California with 50-mile-an-hour winds. So it looks like the thinking for California is unchanged. The storm arrives on Sunday. So this is a situation where tomorrow is your day to get yourself in place, and maybe Sunday morning, but depending on where you are in Southern California, because it's going to move from south to north. But you don't want to look at the center of the storm here, because the moisture and the heavy rain is going to be way out in front. You know, think about what's happening here. You have this river of air from the flow coming this way. It's pushing north on the storm, and then the low pressure off this way pushing north on the storm. So it's going down this river right between those, and so it's not just propelling the storm, it's actually stretching the storm out in terms of the moisture. It's pulling the moisture out of the storm. So the moisture is going to be way hundreds of miles ahead of where the center is. And these lines here all indicate the timing of the center, not the effects in Southern California. So this is really going to pick up on Sunday. The peak is going to be, I think, about midnight Sunday night, and then significant improvement from south to north on Monday as the moisture pulls away, although some lingering moisture was going to stay around for a good part of the week, it looks like. But this core of moisture related to the dying hurricane, then tropical storm, looks like late in the afternoon to evening hours into the midnight, early morning
Welcome
hours
to my
on
chat.
Monday.
For people
Looks
that are
like the peak
watching,
of
thank you
that,
for
again,
coming.
starting
Please
earlier
subscribe,
in San Diego, and then
like,
taking
and
longer to
comment.
get
Thank
on
you.
up to the Mojave Desert, past Los Angeles, Palm Springs, and into the Mojave
Go
Desert,
for
and
chat.
points north, by the way, and points east, Las Vegas and so forth. But the core and the worst of it does look like it is going to be from San Diego to Los Angeles, and against those mountains, especially both sides of the mountains, starting on the east side into the deserts, then moving to the west side where the people live. Guys?
Yeah, you know, Brian, so interested in this newest update to see the winds down, you know, at 130 miles per hour. My question for you is, as you know, typically it's that northeast quadrant of a hurricane that is typically the most severe. When this comes on shore, are we still thinking that there could be that potential for perhaps any like spit up tornadoes?
No, we're not expecting tornadoes. The atmosphere is not really set up for that. Because if you think about it, the river of air, everything is flowing north, right? To get tornadoes, and then you have all these mountains and so forth. So tornadoes don't seem like the threat here. The threat is that you have, this is some of the driest country in the driest part of the United States is in the southwestern part of the United States. We know all the deserts, and even for anybody that spent any time in Southern California, you know, it doesn't rain in Southern California, except when it does, of course, but it essentially never rains in the summertime. And places like Palm Springs, this storm is forecast to dump essentially a year's worth of rain on Palm Springs in the matter of a day. So this is why there's this big threat here, is that these places, the way the topography is, if you get in the desert, you know, if Southern California and California in general is so magnificent because you have the ocean and the mountains and the deserts and every kind of terrain in between, and every kind of climate and snow and everything else going on there. But the thing is that the mountains are relatively young because they're caused by the earth moving. As we all know, it moves in California and compressing the plates together in their little mini plates and pushing up these very steep mountains. So you get essentially a big catcher's mitt in the air to catch that moisture, and then that moisture has to go down. And so how does it go down? It gets into the little valleys, and it just comes kind of flying down very steep mountains and then into rivers. Now, when you get into the cities, the rivers, actually, the original river, for instance, the Los Angeles River was a river. Sort of, it was kind of a creek, more or less, but it would rage in heavy rain. But now they've controlled it, and it really looks like a big cement ditch that goes right through the city. And normally it's got a little trickle of water. And in the summertime, barely any water going through it, just a little trickle sometimes down the middle of this big cement ditch. Well, this river may very well fill and flood outside of the river in this event. This is a big, now it's a huge ditch, but it's cement, and enough rain may very well fall because all the rain that hits the mountains ends up at the lower elevations, of course, and it feeds into these now managed rivers that direct the water through this incredibly dense metropolitan area and take it to the ocean. Yeah. And somehow that water's got to get there, and if it all ends up at the same time in the river, then the river is can't deal with that. So
what's up, Nightmare?
Massive flooding occurred in the tropical storm in 1939. Now there's more water management than there was in 1939, but there's also much more cement
in California,
in Southern California. Right. In 1939, there were a lot of orange groves and farm fields and undeveloped land and so forth. Now you have, it's all essentially all paved over on the east side of the mountains. So this is the most significant flooding event, flooding threat, we'll say, in recent times in terms of comparing it to the potential and what we've seen. So this is something we're going to talk all about here coming up in just a few minutes at the top of the hour.
Absolutely. And also, seeing at least that tropical storm watch has now been expanded to include Los Angeles as well, expecting that to happen. And so that now officially has as well. So there's a lot of play here. And as always, Brian, thank you so much for your excellent expertise. And we'll continue to check in with you. We'll see you in just a few minutes.
Yeah, so interesting to see the newest update. I guess if there's any bit of good news, if there's a silver lining, it's that the barometric pressure has obviously increased. And so an inverse relationship with an increase in the barometric pressure means a decrease in the strength of the storm. And the winds are down. And we finally have some, quote, ground truth, of course, that was from the hurricane hunters.
Exactly, with the hurricane hunters actually being able to go into the storm itself and get a sample of it. And so we know that there's still quite some left. We're going to be feeling those impacts. But Fox Weather, we've got you covered all weekend long as we continue to track Hilary. So tune in for Craig Herrera, Bob Van Dillen,
well, if it's sunny, that's because
and much more coverage across the region. I'll be there all weekend as this powerful storm approaches the U.S. You can follow it all right here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ.
How you been doing, Nightmare? I haven't seen you around a lot, bud. Hope you're doing well. Go here, Nightmare. Come on, stop.
Right now on Fox Weather, the 5 p.m. update is in, and Hurricane Hilary is still a powerful Category 4 storm churning in the eastern Pacific, and it's got its sights set on the southwestern U.S. Fox Weather is your hurricane HQ, and we've got the very
Okay,
latest
Nightmare.
launches, warnings, and
I
the
didn't know
projected
you were
path
at work,
that puts
bud.
it on a
My bad.
collision course in Southern California. And Hilary is already making history. While hurricanes and tropical storms are not new for places like Cabo San Lucas, this is the first time ever that a tropical storm watch
I'm
has
almost
been
to
issued in
500
California.
subs,
That includes
so
Los Angeles County, San Diego,
almost.
and Palm Springs. And residents there are being told to prepare for the impacts.
If there's a storm surge, which sometimes happens with like something like this, then we're just praying for the best because it can be pretty bad.
We have to adjust to
And if
other
you know somewhere in
things that
California,
are
you don't
coming
have
our
to
way
pay
in our
theirs.
vehicles.
Everybody's talking about batting down the hatches.
And it's not just the Pacific. There are 4 disturbances brewing in the Atlantic that could spell some real trouble for the Gulf Coast and Puerto Rico. Everything that you need to know about the tropics right now on Fox Weather Now. Good afternoon, and thank you for watching Fox Weather. Right now, it's 5 o'clock in the east and 2 p.m. out west. I'm Kendall Smith, in today for Ian Oliver, and this is Fox Weather Now. And right now, there's some serious trouble brewing for Southern California. Hurricane Hilary is a powerful Category 4 storm raging in the eastern Pacific that is going to be bringing
I'm not
heavy
there
rain and
yet, but
strong
I'm getting
winds to
close.
the US, as well as locations in Southern California
Not
and
there
the desert
quite yet.
southwest heading into the next few days. In fact, for the first time ever, a tropical storm watch has been issued in California, and this includes
I
some
woke up
major
one day and I was
metropolitan
like,
areas
huh?
like San Diego, as well as Los
Almost
Angeles
500?
and Palm
Sweet.
Springs. And for the very
Not-
latest on Hilary,
not
as
quite
well as
there
several
yet,
other
but
disturbances that are brewing in the
I'm
Atlantic,
getting up
we want to
there.
bring in now Fox Weather hurricane specialist Brian Norcross. Because Brian, as we were just speaking to you a few moments ago, it's really interesting to see what the numbers have done. The population under that previous tropical storm watch, just over 11 million. Now that number is more than doubled.
Yeah, well, now that they've moved it a little bit farther north and to the west, including all the way to the Ventura County coast, essentially. So all of Southern California now under the tropical storm watch. And the tropical storm watch means that tropical storm force winds, 40 miles per hour, sustained 40 miles per hour or higher, are possible. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to get winds that strong, because especially in California, where you have all those mountains, the winds will be stronger where the wind goes through the passes. As anybody that's spent any time in California knows, that when you're in a pass, it can be just whistling, and then you get behind the mountain, you don't have that much depending on the direction of the wind. So it just means the possibility, depending on the time, the direction of the wind, and how the air is interacting with the passes, and essentially all of Los Angeles County and point south and all the way to the Nevada line is under this tropical storm watch for the possibility of these strong winds, and then of course higher winds at the higher elevations. So the biggest threat for winds are going to be up the hillsides and up the mountains. That also will be the biggest threat for rain. All right, let's get to the new advisory information. I have some little clarity on what's happened here. The wind estimate now, as of 5 o'clock Eastern time, 2 p.m. Pacific time, is 130 miles per hour. The hurricane hunters were out there, but they didn't complete their mission for some reason that I don't know. Suddenly their data stopped, and I saw that, okay, they measured pressure that was higher than the estimates before. All we were doing is getting estimates from the Hurricane Center experts and the people that do this analysis of the satellite to come up with the estimates. And they had lower pressures and higher wind speeds. So the hurricane hunters went in there, they sampled part of the storm, we quit getting the data. I don't know what happens. Sometimes that happens. They have a communications problem, and they just have to fly back to the base, which is, by the way, in Mississippi, unless they were going somewhere else, and we lost track of them. So what the Hurricane Center forecasters done is kind of taken a compromise between what they know and what the indications are based on the satellite, and they came up with 130 miles per hour. So until we get another hurricane hunter in there, we're not going to have really good data from this storm. But anyway, moving to the northwest at 12, I mean, none of this is really relevant. The big issue here is the rain heading toward Southern California. So here are the estimates on the wind speeds. and here is the timing. But this is the timing of the center, and this is really important to understand because everybody goes and looks at the cone. We went through this last year with Ian. This is another one of those don't look at the cone situations for your timing. This is where the storm is going to go. The cone is going to tell you where it's going. It's going towards Southern California, but the timing is going to be super misleading because if you notice here, we have a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane, and it looks like it's well south here in Baja on Sunday evening, or Sunday afternoon, actually. But it's already going to be spreading significant rain all over from San Diego County up to LA County on out into the deserts by that time, San Bernardino County by that time. So because the moisture is going to get pulled out of this and pulled to the north. But you notice when you look at the forecast for the winds here that in the heart of Los Angeles, they're forecasting a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm now, and these would be in the overnight hours of Monday. The moisture would be moving out by that time, but the winds would still be blowing. So this is going to be an event that starts on Saturday, extends into the first part of next week, and then some moisture is going to linger is the current thinking now, but the big threat is going to be in that Sunday into early Monday timeframe. And we can look at that here if we kind of monitor the moisture. So this is what we're going to look at, that dark green there. Now watch as it comes north, and here are the days over here. So there's tomorrow, and you see already we're getting moisture into over Southern California being pulled out of the storm. That's tomorrow. Now, I think tomorrow is not going to be a dangerous day because it's not going to be super windy until later in the day. So first part of tomorrow, most of the day, you're okay to move around and get yourself in position. But then when we get to Sunday, now you see, look at the dark greens here. This is deep tropical moisture. This is kind of Miami air that's moving in, and it's moving in with velocity. And you notice the winds here coming in from the southeast. So that's going to put this super rich tropical moist feed into the mountains on the east side of the mountains. So we have in the southern part of the state, there peninsular range down in there. So all over here in the low desert, the Colorado desert, and then pushing north, that's where the moisture, the big moisture is going tomorrow. And then things start to switch later on tomorrow night because look, this is on Monday, and here come the winds the other direction early on Monday. So this is now putting it on the west side of the mountains where everybody lives, on the coastal plain and up into the LA basin and so forth. So everybody's going to get it, just be different timing. And then, of course, the gaps in the mountains are going to affect everything. Let's look at that in some detail. So, because this is really the critical information here, is that the winds are whistling from the southeast. So if you have some way that southeast winds are going to affect you, either because you got a mountain pass that's aimed that way or you're on that side of the mountains, this is when you're going to get it. On Sunday, it's going to increase and be really bad. Look at the heavy rain out here in the deserts at that time. And then here we are early Monday. The moisture is starting to move out, but the winds are coming the other way. And here we are over the peninsular range there, the San Gabriel Mountains up there, north of the LA basin, all getting the moist flow at that time. So as that wind changes, it changes when and where the rain falls. You see in here, you see those dots of heavy rain? Look, in here and in here, and those are where mountain peaks catch more rain and so forth, but rain amounts up to 10 inches, widespread in the 5-inch range. And Palm Springs only gets about 4.5 inches in a whole year on average, and Palm Springs is right in the middle of it, for instance. A little less rain on the west side in general, but still dangerous flooding rains. And you see it's in the mountains there. That's where the San Ynez Mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains, that's where the Hollywood Hills are. Then we go down south to San Diego. This is the peninsular range there, Santa Rosa Mountains, part of that range, off into the desert. Look at the heavier rains. Darker colors are heavier rains out here in the Colorado desert, the low desert of southeastern California, and then the high desert up in the Mojave Desert over toward Las Vegas. Heavy rain, but especially Death Valley. There's a history of serious flooding there. Along the range there just to the north, the Mojave Desert, right in here. All these places subject to flooding here over the weekend. Quick mention of the Atlantic. We have a lot of dust out there. That's going to tend to keep things from getting too bad. We got a lot of systems, though. The one that's most interesting immediately is this one that's near the coming into the Bahamas now. 40% chance. Hurricane Center gives it of becoming a tropical depression. We don't see anything terribly strong. On balance, I think this is going to be a good thing for Texas, but some gusty winds coming with that. That's going to be the first part of next week. And here you can see the moisture coming, and everybody in Texas is celebrating this. They desperately need this moisture, and hopefully it doesn't get very strong. Don't think it will, but still you could have some winds gusting up to 30 or 40 miles an hour driven by that super strong high pressure. Quick mention of this system here, only a 20% chance of it developing, but watch it because it's heading toward the islands and Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic here over the next few days. All right, guys, lots going on, but the big concern is for this event heading towards Southern California, potentially unprecedented flood event that maybe will rival the 1939 tropical storm that came in that caused problems all across the South. Guys?
We sure hope not, but unfortunately, the trends kind of show that might be the case. And so, Brian, as it's getting closer and closer, I think the question on a lot of folks' mind is, what about the landfall? What are your thoughts right now on what we could see with the landfall of Hilary?
Well, I think it's odds are it's going to be somewhere in the northern Baja California area. But since the storm is going to be weakening and the core will be dissipating at the time, the landfall is not really relevant. The issue really is when the most dense moisture hits the mountains. Right. That's where the really bad things are going to happen. Right. And that's going to happen well in advance of landfall. So that's going to, that's the thing we're going to really watch for, is that moisture moving in.
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned that, Brian, that, the landfall doesn't really matter. It's just the arrival of the moisture, which is going to be impacting the entire region. And that's the kind of key takeaway right here. All right. Well, Fox Weather Hurricane Specialist Brian Norcross, thank you so much for being with us. And we'll be checking in with you later on.
Okay. Take care.
And as we said, this storm, it is promising to bring some very significant rain to locations in Southern California, as well as the desert Southwest. And look at these live cameras. San Diego, Los Angeles, Palm Springs, all three locations look pretty nice, right? Well, not for long, as Hilary will be arriving here soon. We'll start to have kind of the impacts of that moisture certainly by tomorrow, and then really peaking on Sunday on into Monday, like Brian was just mentioning. And so we've got a lot at stake here because this is coming right over the weekend. I'm sure a lot of folks have outdoor plans, things going on. We know that it's the start of school for the public school district of San Diego. And so this is horrible timing when you consider everything that's happening. And so the fact that, like Brian was also mentioning, we still have a very strong Category 4 storm moving to the northwest at about 12 miles per hour. It will be continuing to impact the Baja Peninsula, so very heavy torrential rain, upwards of 10 to even 12 inches or more in some spots. Large swells, extremely dangerous swells, also dangerous rip currents, a very strong wind gust. We're talking about those tropical storm force winds that are extending outwards more than 300 miles. And so kind of tracking the winds out, you can see Cabo San Lucas right now, really not too bad, but anticipate things to kind of go downhill within really the next few hours as it works its way closer to the coastline, and then heading into certainly Saturday and into Sunday. That's when we'll be experiencing the most significant impacts, especially in places like San Diego, as well as Los Angeles. We have about 22 million people included under this cone. Also, we've got about 21 million in the tropical storm watch. So a lot is at stake here. That's why it's imperative that you stay tuned in to us here at Fox Weather, as we will get you and your family safely through this event. At Fox Weather, we do have you covered all weekend long as we're continuing to track Hilary. Tune in for Brian Norcross, Craig Herrera, Bob Van Dillen, Max Gordon, and much more coverage across the region, as they will be out west all weekend long as this powerful storm approaches the U.S. You can follow it all right here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ. Well, helping people survive hurricanes. It means making sure that homes and buildings can withstand the relentless wind, waves, and rain. Coming up, we'll show you the technology that's helping strengthen building codes and save both lives and property. We'll be right back. We are back on Fox Weather, and Fox Weather is your hurricane HQ as we're tracking Hurricane Hilary that's churning in the Eastern Pacific. And this storm, it means business. It's working to the northwest at about 12 miles per hour right now. We just had the latest advisory come in from the National Hurricane Center. That was as of 5 o'clock Eastern. And so sustained winds now have dropped 130 miles per hour sustained. Pressure is also at 948 millibars. And so the hurricane hunters are expected to head back into the storm within the next 3 hours or so to gather even more data. But as of right now, the latest information, the hurricane force winds are extending about 45 miles outside of the center of circulation. Now notice this area. This area of yellow indicates our tropical storm force winds. So these are winds that are sustained about 40 miles per hour or stronger. And that extends a lot farther, more than 300 miles. And so as Hilary continues to track its way to the north, we will slowly but surely start to see decay. And that's because of the more hostile upper level winds, as well as the colder sea surface temperatures. So the sea surface temperatures right now in the Pacific, the Eastern Pacific, they're in the 80s. But that's going to quickly drop off to the 70s and then eventually the low 60s, low to mid 60s as we get close to kind of the US-Mexico border. Said though, we do have tropical storm watch in effect for nearly 21 million people. So this includes major metropolitan areas, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Oceanside, San Diego, Palm Springs. We are all included under this tropical storm watch. And so you have to be prepared. That's the takeaway. And so very strong gusty winds as well as heavy torrential rain are going to be the most significant threats. So it's important to prepare now because that window of time, it's quickly shutting. So have a lot of water on hand. Make sure that you've got non-perishable food items as well as a first aid kit, medical supplies, special items. Also having an LED flashlight with extra batteries and potentially even a hand cranked radio. These are all items that are going to be very helpful because of the fact that some locations where we are dealing with just extreme flooding, so mudslides, debris flows, all probable, could be stranded and cut off for several days now. So we'll be watching in Los Angeles, potentially upwards of 2 to 3 inches of rain. These are locations where we average less than 1/100th of an inch of rain during the month of August. So it's remarkable to see these kinds of totals, especially during this time of the year. And Sunday into Monday is when we are anticipating the peak in the storm. We've been talking about how Hilary has already made history, prompting the first ever tropical storm watches for parts of Southern California. And so there's a lot at play here. This part of the country, Michael, I want to bring you in on this because we know that especially, and Brian Norcross mentioning this as well, we know it's not always sunny in California. Most often it is,
right.
But this weekend and kind of the start of next week, definitely not going to be the case. And in fact, it's the complete opposite. Folks need to prepare for a very significant storm.
You know, it's so interesting because I have an aunt that lives in sunny San Diego,
Right.
and I was on the phone with her earlier, and she was saying she moved from New York. She was like, I moved from New York to San Diego, so I would never have to deal with these types of weather conditions.
Exactly.
And here we are talking about Sunday evening into Monday. It looks like they could be fairly prolific in terms of not only the rain, but the wind.
Right.
And, you know, you think about the fact that in California, we've been inundated this year. 12 atmospheric rivers, we've had historic snow, and this is something else that we're adding on top of it. It's going to really be stressful for a lot of folks.
You're exactly right. And kind of the overall atmospheric that we have, it's very interesting, Michael. So we've got this area of low pressure back off to the west, Southern California, so that dip, and then that area of high pressure, which is responsible for all that heat in the central U.S. And that's where Hilary is sandwiched, right in between. And that's why Hilary's working its way kind of parallel to the coastline to the north-northwest. And so that is going to bring all of that atmospheric moisture straight into places like Southern California, Western Arizona, Southern Nevada, all areas that are going to be taking the brunt of the system.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because when you think about tropical systems in the Pacific, you don't typically think about them riding up the Baja California coast and then into California, right? It's the reason why we have our first ever tropical storm watch for parts of SoCal.
Yeah.
That's not the case right now. It's that southwest wind aloft that's helping to steer and guide not just what we typically, where we see that monsoonal moisture, but where that tropical moisture is going to come into play for the desert Southwest.
You're exactly right. So we think back, you know, just last year where we had Tropical Cyclone K, which brought some significant impacts, debris flows, mudslides, just catastrophic damage. And unfortunately, we could be dealing with a very similar situation on our hands this go around. So it's imperative folks are preparing.
It is so imperative that folks make sure that they are prepared because, again, Sunday evening into Monday is when we'll see those U.S. influences.
And as Hilary approaches, flood-prone areas in California's San Bernardino County are bracing for a mess. The county's watershed burned by the El Dorado fire back in 2020. It's not fully healed yet, and this leaves the area more vulnerable to flooding. County officials are taking measures to prepare families for some potentially dangerous situations. And San Bernardino County's Public Works Director, Brandon Biggs, joins us now. And we really appreciate you joining us today on Fox Weather because we know that this isn't the first time that your county has had to brace for flooding, especially since the fire left some significant burn scars. So I want to ask you, how has this impacted the way that you plan for flash flooding? And also, kind of what have you learned over the past 3 years?
Yeah, those mountain and canyon areas that were subject to the burn, they get extra attention because there's a lot of unimproved facilities out there. Most of the area, it's in national forest land where you've got these natural water courses that are flowing through private property, and we have very minimal developed flood control facilities out there. So we put extra eyes on them. We have camera systems. We have fully activated crews. We pre-stage equipment and have barricades so we can quickly close roads and clean up after any kind of a mud flow.
So Brendan, you briefly mentioned, you know, some of those measures that you all have put into place to kind of prevent the mudslides and debris flows. But what conditions does your team monitor when you're considering evacuation orders?
Well, we've got a multi-agency team here that we coordinate as each storm approaches, and we've developed some protocols. We look at the rain intensities and how much rain is going to be coming, and that triggers us different alert levels. So with this storm coming in, it meets some of those trigger points where we're going to be considering issuing out our TENS evacuation notices or shelter in place. We have different levels that we'll evaluate as we start coordinating with the National Weather Service today and tomorrow. So we can certainly issue out evacuation warnings and tell people, we start closing roads to, stay out of the areas that are more prone to flooding, and encourage the residents to start monitoring the weather themselves, look at our social media posts, look at our resources that we have on our webpage to help prepare themselves.
Absolutely. And especially for those folks, they just need to remember that they have to heed those evacuation orders. And so, Brendan, in particular, are there any areas in your county that you're more concerned about than others?
Yeah, really, it's the mountain canyon areas. We have Mount Baldy, Lido Creek, Forest Falls, Oak Glen. The Forest Falls and Oak Glen are where the El Dorado fire was. Those need particular attention. The way that this storm looks to be tracking is it's more in the desert areas. So we have a lot of desert areas that are becoming more populated, and they have unimproved facilities, areas like Joshua Tree, some of the eastern desert. So they need to be extra vigilant. And when they see a road closure or they see water crossing a road, we say turn around, don't drown. You don't know if the road is washed away underneath there. So really, be alert and pay attention to those warnings and the signs and the message boards that we have out.
Absolutely. And so, heading into the next few days, it's going to be really busy for you and your team. So speaking of that, how are your teams kind of preparing? Do you feel that you all are fully staffed? And kind of what are those hours going to look like for you all?
Yeah, we are activating 24/7 as the storm comes in. We've already pre-positioned equipment in those areas that are prone to flooding. We've already got message boards out. We've got barricades in place, so we can activate and respond as the need arises. So we do get a lot of summer monsoons, which can dump a lot of water in a very short period of time. So we are used to reacting in the summer. So we have all those systems in place. So we feel like we're in good shape to respond to this.
Well, that is certainly great to hear. Brendan Biggs with the San Bernardino County's Public Works Office. Thank you so much for joining us on Fox Weather. We'll be thinking of you as we head into the weekend.
Thank you.
And Hilary is not the only story that's coming out of the tropics. I want to go ahead and take a look at the Atlantic Basin, which has gotten a whole lot more interesting and a lot more active as we've got 4 areas that we're watching. So one system compared to the others has a greater chance of actually having impacts, especially to us here at the U.S. mainland, and that is this disturbance number 4 right there. But we do also have disturbance number 3, as well as Invest 99L and Invest 98L, which also have chances of development over the coming days. And so let's talk about disturbance number 4. I was mentioning how we could be feeling those impacts, especially in places like kind of the central and western Gulf of Mexico. So Texas, Louisiana, portions of Mississippi. We've got about a 40% chance of development over the next 7 days. So potentially by kind of the beginning to middle part of next week, we could have a tropical depression on our hands. Now, this is kind of a lower end chance, but it's a chance nonetheless. And what is kind of the silver lining to all of this is that we could be picking up some beneficial rain, especially for some very drought-stricken locations. And so you can see from Corpus Christi, where we are experiencing severe to extreme drought, to pick up potentially 2 to 3 inches, that would be great news. Also over to Victoria, about 1 to 2 inches. Houston, lesser amounts. We definitely need to see more rain in Houston, but at least we are anticipating about a ½ an inch to an inch, potentially a little bit more, especially getting closer to the coastline. So there is the silver lining. Also, so we could be dealing with a little bit of a cool down on our hands. So that would be pretty welcome as well. And Hurricane Hilary is raging in the eastern Pacific with its sights set on the U.S. Southwest. California is under its first ever tropical storm watch as San Diego and Palm Springs await what's being described as a rare and dangerous storm. Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ, the latest information when we come right back. Good afternoon, and thank you for watching Fox Weather here at the bottom of the hour. And right now, all eyes are set on the Eastern Pacific and Southern California as powerful Hurricane Hilary, it's moving toward the U.S., bringing very heavy rain and strong winds to locations all across the Southwest heading into the weekend. In fact, for the first time ever, a tropical storm watch has been issued in portions of Southern California. And this includes some major metropolitan areas. We're talking about San Diego, Los Angeles, as well as Palm Springs. So there's a lot at stake. And that's why it's so important that you are staying up to date with the latest information. And so we do want to bring you the latest information coming in from that 5 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center, because there have been a few changes, not a lot, but a few. And so the latest information, sustained winds down from 145 miles per hour as of that 11 a.m. advisory, now down to about 130 mile per hour sustained winds. Moving to the northwest at 12 miles per hour, so that's about a 2 mile per hour increase. And then pressure 948 millibars. But notice, I mean, boy, is it impressive on visible satellite. Notice you can see how sprawling and massive Hilary really is as it's getting closer to the Baja. So we're starting to have those kind of outer rain bands impacting the Baja. And so gusty winds as well as heavy rain, large swells. That's the impact throughout tonight, as we already are dealing with hurricane warnings as well as hurricane watches kind of right along that west coast. All right, so here's the changes I was mentioning. We watched as the kind of winds have kind of increased a little bit. So you can see as of that 5 o'clock advisory, we now have 130 mile per hour sustained winds. So you can see also the central pressure has gone from 938 millibars down to 948 millibars. So essentially, kind of take away this, the lower the number in terms of our millibars, the central pressure, the stronger the storm is. So to see the kind of central pressure actually increase, that's good news. And so the movement to the northwest at about 12 miles per hour, that's not a big change compared to what we were dealing with, about 10 mile per hour movement. But tropical storm watches, as well as hurricane watches, hurricane warnings, that's what we've got in place. Cabo San Lucas, although we're not going to be experiencing any direct impacts, we'll definitely be feeling those impacts at least kind of over the next few hours. So into tonight and certainly the early morning hours as it works its way a little further right along the coastline. Eventually, heading into tomorrow, that's when we'll start to see that moisture arriving in Southern California, as well as the desert Southwest. So you need to be prepared, because it is going to mean a lot of heavy rain, which is going to result in flash flooding, as well as mudslides, debris flows, you name it. We've got it on the table for us. And so here's a look at the time to be ready. If you live in San Diego, at the very latest, you need to be prepared by Sunday. So if you can have those storm preps wrapped up by Saturday evening, I would highly recommend doing so, because all of the kind of strong gusty winds, the heavy rain, the large swells, that's going to be arriving certainly by Sunday, peaking and on into Monday. So you kind of want to batten down those hatches and find your location and stay there. Don't try to be getting outdoors and doing anything outside this weekend. It's not the weekend to do so. Flood alerts also have been expanded, so they encompass a good chunk of the Great Basin. Notice Nevada from Las Vegas all the way up to Ely, also Cedar City, Richfield, Flagstaff, Yuma, Arizona. So a good chunk of kind of the desert Southwest in general will be feeling the impacts, all that moisture. And eventually, we could be talking about that moisture from Hilary making its way right along the West Coast, further northward, all the way up into places like Idaho. So this is going to have a big impact on much of the West in general. And so we'll be talking about it all the way into kind of the middle part of next week. So anticipate that. Santa Barbara, though, our elevation just above sea level, only 50 feet in elevation. But we have the Santa Ynez Mountains. And so that's the big concern. Elevation there, 4,700. We know water has to go somewhere, wants to flow downhill. And so that's why we'll be talking about potentially quite a bit of flash flooding in these locations. So Ventura over to Santa Barbara, Malibu, these are areas that I'm very concerned with because of the fact that there's nowhere else for that water to go but work its way closer to the coastline and to the ocean. So through the next several days, understand that it's going to be a rough go of things. This is going to be most likely an unprecedented event. And so again, we know that about 21 million people are included under that current tropical storm watch. And I would not be surprised if we even see a further expansion of that as what we have just seen occur so far this afternoon. So here's what we know right now, that rain to start on Saturday before it peaks on Sunday and into early Monday morning. I do want to bring in now Fox Weather meteorologist Michael Estime, because again, the fact of the matter is that this is a very unusual event, especially for the fact that it's August after all.
Right.
It's unusual, it's not unprecedented, but a lot of these locations, we are going to be receiving close to our yearly average rainfall in just a few days.
You know, and here's what's even more wild. So we crunched the numbers on what our forecast is projecting versus what it looks like in terms of a yearly average. And you have got to see this. Kendall's exactly right. A lot of spots in the desert Southwest could pick up their yearly total of rainfall in this event. But a couple of isolated spots, look at Death Valley, California, known as the hottest place on Earth, right? They set record temperatures of like 134 degrees in years past, but they're expecting out of this system 275% above their yearly average. What does that mean to you in layman's terms? It means that they're basically going to be picking up 3 years worth of rain through the weekend and into early next week. That's a ton of rain. So the next big question is, well, how much rain are we talking? Let's focus in. Here's generally speaking where Death Valley is. That's upwards of 3 to 5 inches of rain. By the way, in Death Valley, for the month of August, they only typically pick up 1/100th of an inch of rain. So when we're talking about 3 to 5, perhaps even in some of the northern tier and on top of some of those mountains, just east of San Diego, as you know, that mountain range, it'll peak at around 6,500 feet. We could be talking about more than 5 to 8 inches of rain. That's a ton of rain. Here's what it looks like toward, again, the San Gabriel Mountains. Really, it's our mountaintops where we'll pick up the heaviest rain. All of that rain, though, funneling down the mountain toward Malibu, and unfortunately creeks, rivers, and streams will become inundated, overwhelmed with water. We're expecting lots of flash flooding in this area, and especially just on the eastern edge of the mountain ranges. As Brian Norcross was saying before, the topography really has an important impact on all of this. But from Death Valley through Vegas, several inches, Kendall, of rain is possible. It's one of the reasons why Sunday we have an extreme risk for some pretty serious flooding moving forward. And it's not just on Sunday, but that threat will linger into Monday too. So again, I think rain is certainly going to be a huge issue out of this.
Right.
Sunday night, especially into early Monday.
Yeah, I mean, this is a level 4 out of 4 threat, especially on Sunday. So we've got a lot at play here, and it's not just the heavy rain that we know. It's also the fact that Hilary is expected to bring some really strong winds to much of the Southwest. And so although they're not expected to be hurricane force, they're still going to be very, very dangerous. Now, notice what's going to be taking place. So we still have Hilary working into a moderately conducive environment, but notice what's up ahead. So we've got some dry air, meaning that Hilary, as it runs into the dry air, as well as those cooler sea surface temperatures, that's when we will start to see Hilary essentially fall apart. But with that being said, we will still be talking about some pretty strong gusty winds. So I don't want you to let your guard down, but we aren't talking about a major hurricane impacting Southern California. Now, here, let's time this out. The winds, they are going to be arriving as early as about Sunday morning. So stopping this at about 6 a.m. Notice San Diego, especially into southern Los Angeles, we could be talking about winds gusting about 30 to 40, even upwards of 40 to 50 miles per hour, and it gets stronger. Notice by Sunday night, we will be talking about winds, especially just off the coast, upwards of even 50 to 60 miles per hour as Hilary works its way inland, impacting locations in southern Nevada. So that's when we'll also be talking about some really strong wind gusts come Monday morning. So definitely not the best start to our work week, but also it's all across the region. So the desert Southwest and all the way kind of right along the I-5 corridor where we're going to be feeling those impacts. So unfortunately, folks need to kind of batten down those hatches right now.
Yeah, great call there, Kendall. Absolutely. Rain and wind will certainly be a huge issue moving forward. So friends and family, especially down towards San Diego really need to make sure that they are staying weather ready and weather prepared. And as Hilary spins off the Mexican coastline toward California, strong winds will whip up the waves on the California coast. In fact, coastal regions from San Diego to Long Beach are gearing up for the potential impacts. Fox 5 San Diego forecaster Heather Lake joined Fox Weather earlier today to break down Southern California's preparations. Here's a clip of what Heather had to say.
Good afternoon to you guys there on the East Coast. You know, getting to experience hurricane-style winds on the West Coast, very unique for all of us here this morning. As you take a look out here, we're at Pacific Beach, and the conditions are not as impressive as I think one would imagine preparing for a tropical storm system moving our way. But right now we got 2 to 4 foot sets rolling in. We have some of the best surfers in the country that live here and are actually talking to me about looking forward to the kind of conditions that we could see depending on the path of Hilary. Obviously, you see people getting out on the surf and enjoying it, but could be very dangerous, not only for boaters, surfers alike, increased rip current risk. When we see the south swell, that's what a lot of our surfers are looking for, but we also see storm surge. So a lot of people getting those sandbags today. We have a lot of our county emergency centers getting the sandbags, people having to fill them up with sand and getting ready for those flood prone areas in San Diego County. The biggest question on everyone's mind right now is, how do I prepare for a hurricane? This is very unique, a very unique situation for people on our coastline all the way to our San Diego County deserts. We don't normally get ready for something like this. I will say that we had a very intense rainy season for us, so a lot of people have experienced the rainy season much better and understand when we have a flood watch in effect what to do, which we have right now, Saturday all the way into Monday. So looking ahead and seeing what they need to do. But as far as having a go bag or having a plan in place for a hurricane, people in San Diego are not prepared. They don't know what to do. So that's what we're doing today, is just talking to folks, making sure that they know what to do to get ready.
And that was Fox 5 San Diego forecaster Heather Lake reporting. And right now, cities and towns along the West Coast are preparing for Hilary. So let's take a deeper dive into what you might need as the system turns closer to the U.S. mainland, because it's really important that you are planning ahead of time. That window to prepare, it's quickly getting smaller and smaller. And so that's why you need to know your zone. You have to understand, especially if you kind of live in an evacuation zone. Right now, there's no evacuations up for locations in Southern California. But it is important, like Heather was mentioning, to build an emergency kit that can sustain you and your family for about 3 to 5 days. So make sure you've got a lot of water in that kit, as well as non-perishable food items, some tools, so hammers, as well as even just anything else you might need, sanitation items. But I think what's most important is the important family documents. So think about your driver's license, as well as your social security card, your insurance, all of the important documentation that you are going to need in the event that, unfortunately, you might be kind of stranded for a while. So definitely start to prepare now, because we are going to be feeling those impacts in Southern California as early as tomorrow. And it was a dangerous commute this morning in New England as severe storms rolled across Rhode Island and Massachusetts, with several tornadoes reported. The details and video of the aftermath. And Fox Weather comes right back. Fox Weather is your hurricane HQ. And as Hurricane Hilary turns closer to the West Coast, Fox Weather has you covered. You can click the Hurricane HQ tab in the app's navigation for the latest information. We're deploying a team of meteorologists and reporters to keep an eye on the areas expected to get hit the hardest. Make sure to download the Fox Weather app for up-to-the-minute alerts.
At Fox Weather, no matter the situation, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather and everything in between.
We're all in this together.
Because there's nothing more important to us than keeping you safe.
From morning forecasts to holiday travel, we're here for you.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people. That's why we love what we do.
Fox Weather, weathering it together.
We're back on Fox Weather, and we want to go ahead and take a look at Hurricane Hilary, which is still a Category 4 hurricane with very strong winds, 130 mile-per-hour sustained winds, moving to the northwest at 12 miles per hour. Our central pressure also is coming in at 948 millibars, so the lower that number is, the stronger, more intense the storm. On visible satellite, though, you can just see how intense Hilary is. There's that center of circulation. It's a little bit more ragged in nature. It's kind of looked that way over the past 1 to 2 hours or so. But what's kind of happening is that Hilary is moving into a less favorable environment, meaning that kind of that downward trend, that weakening, is expected to occur certainly as we head into Saturday. Now, between now and the early morning hours, we could still see a little bit of a bump up in that overall intensity, but it's struggling as those sea surface temperatures, they are also quite a bit colder. So we're in the 80s right now, eventually dropping down into the 70s and then the 60s once we reach kind of the coastline of Southern California. And that is why, also in addition with those kind of more hostile upper level winds, why Hilary is going to have a hard time maintaining itself. And that's why it's just going to kind of fall apart at that point. But heading into tomorrow, notice so sustained winds down about 120 miles per hour. That's as it's reaching its way closer to kind of the west coast of the Baja Peninsula. That's where we are forecasting most likely that landfall to occur. But that landfall doesn't really mean a whole lot. It's the fact that all that moisture, it's going to be around the entire kind of region through really the end of the weekend and on into next week. I mean, this is going to have some significant impacts for millions of people. We've got more than 21 million people under a tropical storm watch right now in Southern California. This is very unusual. This has never happened before. And so that's why the hurricane hunters, they've got additional flights scheduled. So tonight, 5:15 p.m. Pacific time, tomorrow morning, and then again tomorrow night. And then on Sunday during the early morning hours as well, they will be collecting critical data, and we will be bringing you their latest findings right here on Fox Weather. Things in the Gulf are heating up. So we're tracking 4 disturbances in the Atlantic. So 2023, it has been busy so far, to say the least. We've had 5 named storms so far, Michael, and unfortunately we know that we're getting closer and closer to the peak of our Atlantic hurricane season.
Yeah, we typically peak September the 10th to September the 11th. That's typically when we see the most number of storms, and that's when we see the most active part. But we have 4 already, and really we want to work basically from west to east, because this is really the storm that we're tracking that's closest to the United States, which could have some influences on our weather. But again, as you mentioned, there's a lot of moisture to play with. The open waters of the Atlantic, of course, as you know, earlier in the year and earlier this summer, a lot of it was subdued because of all of the dust from Africa. Well, as of this point, it looks like a lot of that dust is really beginning to kind of fizzle and fade, and it's really opening up that that channel for these tropical systems to really get going.
Exactly. So you mentioned, we've got that dry, dusty air still in place, especially a little further to kind of the east of the Lesser Antilles. But as it kind of is able to overcome all that dry, dusty air, that's when we could potentially be talking about some tropical development with some of these areas of disturbed weather. But it's a low-end chance, and also really not posing any threat to land. So that's what we like to see. However, there is a chance, especially with that system that's pretty close to southeastern Bahamas, that's a system that could be bringing some pretty significant rain to places in kind of the western and central Gulf of Mexico by next week.
Yeah, you think about the island of Hispaniola, Haiti, the Dominican Republic. This is the area that we're watching. And as you just mentioned, it looks like that little general cluster of showers and thunderstorms kind of is going to work between Cuba and then say Key West, Florida, through that channel into the open waters of the warm Gulf of Mexico.
Very warm.
Look at these water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. Literally upper 80s and Kendall low 90s toward Clearwater, just off of Tampa. And tropical systems, as you know, they thrive in that sort of environment when it's that warm.
Incredibly warm. And so that's why, especially for some of these areas, we have to watch kind of the beginning to the middle part of next week. A low in chance of development, but still it's a chance nonetheless. And so we'll be watching it very carefully, but it could be bringing some beneficial impacts. And while Southern California is preparing for Hilary's landfall, another state that's been devastated by hurricanes in the past has developed technology to help improve building codes in the event of severe weather. A group of engineers, scientists, and students at the University of Miami have created a wind and wave tank that replicates hurricane-force winds in an effort to strengthen Florida's infrastructure. Fox Weather's Brandy Campbell is in Miami with a look into the tank.
Well, engineers and scientists with the University of Miami are not waiting on a storm to do their research. They brought me into their lab where they have a 38,000-gallon wind and wave tank to see how those two factors impact our buildings and our homes. Their work could ultimately help strengthen our communities.
The path of destruction stretches across South Dade. Homes and businesses are in shambles.
In 1992, Category 5 Hurricane Andrew devastated South Florida. Building codes were changed because of it. Today, research to guide the improvement of current codes are ongoing as they're challenged storm after storm.
Right now, there is no warning.
Like Hurricane Ian in September of 2022 and Hurricane Nicole over a month later. Engineers, scientists, and students at the University of Miami are using this tank to make a difference. They'll complete an almost $400,000 three-year research grant for the National Institute for Standards and Technology.
It's the only one wind wave tank in the world that can generate both ocean waves and Category 5 hurricane force winds on top of those waves.
We got to see an example of what the testing looks like using this little house on what they call the beach. Structures built for testing will be based off of buildings from the Florida Keys or even downtown Miami.
And then we're going to test those structures with a lot of sensors so that we can capture the effects of winds and waves on those models. And some are on stilts, some are not going to be on stilts, some have a gable roof, some will have a flat roof.
Helping them understand the forces that destroy buildings.
Yes, help evaluate and validate the current codes and perhaps guide to revise them so that the buildings can be more resilient.
While this is official research, their work at its core is for their neighbors living in these coastal communities.
I mean, as somebody who lives here, I mean, it's something that we all care for. Like we discussed whenever it's a hurricane season, like right now, we're always kind of waiting for it and we are always stressing about it. But it's a big component for us and it's a big responsibility to do this properly. So sometimes like it's exciting for us as research and when you see the models and they get hit by waves, but when we actually understand the impact and when we're thinking about the communities, and sometimes those communities are vulnerable, and it is a big deal on how we can promote our research, how our results can go into the codes, how, I mean, our impact can really help.
Now, they're just 1 year into the 3 years of research that they'll be doing. I'm told this work could help guide the revision of codes that come up over the next 10 years. Reporting from Miami, Florida, I'm Brandy Campbell, Fox Weather.
Brandy, thank you. Well, Fox Weather has got you covered all weekend long as we're tracking Hilary. Tune in for Brian Norcross, Craig Herrera, Bob Van Dillen, Max Gordon, and much more all across the region. You can follow it all right here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ.
At least 111 people have now been confirmed dead in the Lahaina wildfires. The community is coming together amid the tragedy with plans to come back stronger than ever. Fox Weather's Robert Ray is on Maui with a closer look at the recovery.
It's been over a week since the heartbreak and tragedy of the fires here in Maui, the historic town of Lahaina. Take a look at this drone video as it flies over the seawall and you see the burned out vehicles and the structures. Many people died in those vehicles. Others jumped out and went into the Pacific Ocean over the seawall, waiting in the waters for 5-6 hours, inhaling the smoke, thinking that this could be their last moments. Over 100 people have lost their lives as search and rescue teams are still combing through that town, cadaver dogs being used to find human remains. In the meantime, the breaking news out of this island is the fact that the emergency manager has resigned, claiming that he's got health issues and he can't go forward. But the fact is that he's taken huge criticism for the fact that no sirens and warnings occurred here on Maui. Let's listen to what he told the public just 2 days ago as he was defending the fact that those sirens did not ring out.
Sirens, as I mentioned earlier, is used primarily for tsunamis. The public is trained to seek higher ground in the event that the siren is sounded. Had we sounded the siren that night, we're afraid that people would have gone Mauka. And if that was the case, then they would have gone into the fire.
Now, the Attorney General for Hawaii has launched her own independent investigation into the response, while residents are mourning and taking things into their own hands, some saying that they're not getting the federal response that they expected. And so they're trying to help each other by giving out supplies, but they're concerned about land grabs, which the Hawaii governor has talked about. They do not want big real estate developers to come in and build up the scorched earth that is still in a search activity right now, looking for human remains. That's a big concern for the proud locals here, as the Red Cross here is also on the ground trying to help. Listen.
And we're showing that our communities can do it without FEMA, without Red Cross. Our people can come in and manage their own. They don't need all of the outsiders to come in Maui and tell us what to do and how to live. No, we got it. Our community pulls together strong and supports each other no matter what. Our lands are not for sale. Our people are not for sale.
We're going to make mistakes along the way, folks. We're not going to get it all right. If you let us know what we're not getting, we're going to fix it. But we are committed. We are committed to helping the people of Maui recover from this horrific event.
It's going to be a long, tough weekend here with the search and the reality of what has occurred here in Maui. President Biden expected to be here on Monday. We don't have details as to whether he'll tour on the ground or the air or a combination of both. Reporting in Hawaii, Robert Ray, Fox Weather.
Robert, thank you. And tonight you can catch a special Fox Weather Reports. After the Fire is a 1-hour special that delves into the harrowing experiences of survivors during Hawaii's deadly wildfires. You can catch After the Fire tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Fox Weather. And that'll do it for this hour of Fox Weather Now. Don't forget to download the Fox Weather app to stay up to date with the latest forecast. More Fox Weather is coming up after the break.
I think I'm going to stop it here. Oops. I want to thank everyone that did come. Thanks for your views. Subscribe, like, and comment. Be safe there. Those that are going to get impacted by the hurricane, be safe. And have a good evening, everyone.